I'm going to actually spend a lot of the time on this presentation on the one aspect that is a really big growing business. It's called esports. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this and, obviously are passionate about esports and play some form of it, whether it's PUBG or Counter-Strike, Clash of Clans to, there's a bunch of FIFA, a bunch of these kind of titles that are now brands in their name, brands in their own right, and are actually giving a run for, to the other big sporting organizations and brands. So most of my discussion today is going to be based out of that. And with the COVID situation, it's something that's kind of helped push users towards this format of gaming and giving users a chance. But there's so much more to it, and I'm hopeful that I can spend the next 50 odd minutes now talking and helping you to understand some of these pieces. So if I may quickly go through, begin with a deep dive into esports. Then just look at how esports was leveraged during this whole COVID situation. What is Sports Interactive's involvement been so far? And I think lastly, but perhaps most important piece for you guys is what's the career opportunities in esports. I think what we plan to do, and as discussed with Akhil, and then we are able to answer questions as well. So I'm going to start off with a bit of a deep.
Hello.
Sorry, yeah.
Sir, could you just maximize the slides? It's being shown in the speaker notes.
Oh, is it? So sorry about that. Just give me a moment.
Yes, sir.
Full. I hope you are able to see the full view now.
Yes, sir. We can. Not now.
Okay. It keeps. Okay. Okay. I get it. It's actually just showing you one of the two. Okay. All right. No worries.
Yeah.
Let me just give me 1 second. Yeah. Let me just. Are you able to see it now? Or is that gone back to the PPT view?
So it's gone back to the PPT mode. If you could just start the slideshow, then yeah, now it's fine, sir.
Cool. Okay. So I'm going to just deep dive a little, like I said. So essentially, what is esports, right? Electronic sports, also called esports. It's been organized gaming competitions where users are able to compete individually or as a team. This is largely viewed in a live arena or over television or the internet. Viewership has clearly been on the rise. So if you see these numbers here, the projection is, and this is global numbers from a KPMG report that was out very recently. The growing base of sports, these esports enthusiasts has been on the rise. And as you can see from 2016, from, occasional viewers being 160 million, we've gone over 300 now. And the enthusiasts also have almost doubled, expected to double in the following year. To give you some context of how popular it is, for example, League of Legends, which is a game which had their own tournament, actually had more viewership than the MLB and the NBA finals put together. Whereas, of course, the NFL, which is still the most popular sport, and the NFL finals are the most popular event worldwide, it still garners a lot more. But, clearly it's growing, right? There's a 14% CAGR. This is essentially year-on-year rise in interest in viewership has been 14%. And, that's a growth that we continuously and expect to see going ahead. So just to put something more perspective on this, the global box office, for example, is 43 million. The global games market in 2019 is 150 million. Avengers opened up with a 360 million first day opening weekend. At the same time, GTA, the Grand Theft Auto 5 actually had a 24 hours opening of 800 million. The revenue growth has been phenomenal, and the back of this has been largely through new things like media rights. Advertising has become really, really big. Merchandising and tickets, and just game publisher fees that we've been starting to earn, right? The expectation is this is going to grow by 1.6 billion by 2021. And the media rights are something that people have been snapping up like nobody's business, right? There was a time when you had to go to a site to stream, but now the likes of Twitch, Microsoft's Mixer, there are a bunch of these kind of different platforms that are offering users a chance to actually stream. And because of this, there's an expected 30% year-on-year growth in terms of revenue. The top footballer in Europe, of course, not as popular as Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, but Mbappe had exploits at the World Cup, plays for PSG, earns about 25 million. As his earnings of 2019. To put that in perspective, there's an esports gamer called Ninja, goes by the nickname Ninja. His earnings himself were 35 million, backed off by about a 30 million sponsorship deal with Microsoft's gaming platform called Mixer. IPL gives you $2.7 million as your prize money for the first ranked player in 2019. Fortnite tournament in 2019 got somebody $3 million as a prize money. So clearly the scales are massive now. It's no longer a niche. Back when video gaming started, perhaps as early as the 70s, but organized gaming perhaps started late 90s, in the early 2000s. It was largely a niche of people that would participate in gaming activities, but now clearly both the audiences are blown away by the sheer numbers that have grown, and also the enthusiasts and people playing the game have grown up, right? And again, I'm just referring to the esports business currently. This has no bearing on the other sports fans who play other gaming activities and participate in other such gaming activities. Right? This is currently all about the esports market. So everybody obviously wants to get a big piece of this pie, and the tech giants are attacking the market like nobody's business. Google have started a recent strategic partnership with Activision Blizzard. So this is a gaming title, and they've also started cloud-based gaming, so users are able to log in and play without having to have a console, buy the title, have everything on your machine. This is one of the routes that Google have taken. Amazon obviously owns Twitch, the game streaming platform, and along with the next generation of their cloud-based services that they are already well known for, the AWS services. I'm sure some of you may have heard of this if you are interested in some tech background. But Amazon's web services are one of the most popular services for cloud-based deployments, and it's across, right? It's websites, gaming activities, everything like that. And their plan is also to get into the cloud-based gaming platform. And if you've seen recently, there are small strides made in Amazon apps. You'll see there are certain games that are already made available to you. The plan is to get in there completely very soon. Facebook has also started a gaming platform. So historically, Facebook used to run something called Facebook Games, the Zynga Pokers, the Farmvilles of the time became all popular, but slowly died down. Gaming then got into their Facebook Messenger service. But now they've brought back gaming as a separate tab if you go to log into Facebook, simply because they realize how big that gaming market is. And with the lockdown, and with people having a lot more time on their hands, this seemed to be a logical step to push or accelerate some of their plans of getting into the gaming space once again. Very shortly and soon to be announced is Facebook's and Microsoft are actually going to merge. Microsoft owns a platform called Mixer, which does the streaming already. And they are basically essentially going to be, they're going to tie in together, and Facebook's going to be this one giant within the sphere of gaming as well. Apple obviously has the biggest gamer base simply because of the games that are available on the App Store and the iStore. I've recently launched again another gaming platform called Apple Arcade. Currently, it's interesting users in the casual games market. Games that you can spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes on while you're waiting for a bus or a train, or you're sitting, waiting for somebody to join you. These are the kind of things that Apple have currently involved. And I talked about Microsoft, but Microsoft, like I said, owns the streaming service Mixer, and they're going to soon partner with Facebook. That's the announcement that's impending. I guess COVID has just pushed a few things down the line, but that's where they are at. Twitter themselves have signed a content deal with Overwatch League. So Overwatch League is a league that's owned by Blizzard Games. It's a title of theirs that is popular, and Twitter basically got into the pie by trying to use content to deliver a lot of. So there's a lot of gaming content that will go through that platform. So clearly there's a big focus for the tech giants as well on this on this front of things. Just some information. So based on monthly viewership from Hulu, the streaming platform that's popular in America, the 780 million hours that are spent. The monthly viewership from Twitch, which is the gaming platform itself, has about 1 billion hours. So, you're thereabouts, people actually watching general entertainment shows, and you think that obviously the audience is so much more wider. Is almost, we've been surpassed by, users who are consuming content on a gaming platform that's streaming games that anybody can stream, right? You and me can stream our games off our consoles if we were interested to. Some more perspective for you. $4.7 billion is the amount that has been spent by Amazon India since 2012. The focus obviously largely being, on growing expansion of the market, trying to get infrastructure set up and all of those things. But putting that into perspective, in 2018 alone, the investments were expected to be 4.9 billion in the esports market. So just a sense of how much of money is being pumped into esports. Amazon spends that much money on actually building out this market in India, which is a huge base for them. But at the same time, in the esports global market, that same amount of money has been spent in 1 year, as opposed to 8 years that Amazon's probably spent the same amount of money. The Indian market obviously is still in a nascent stage, right? If you look at the numbers here, the occasional viewers to the enthusiasts from 2017 have grown 5-fold, however, in 2020. The awareness has increased. 55% of the audience are actually aware that of population. Obviously, this is subject matter of KPMG, who surveyed people. So it may not exactly be 55% of the global audience, of the all India audience, but 55% of the people that they spoke to actually have heard about sports-based online gaming and have played and know about it, that it occurs professionally. 22% of that has also played something professionally, while 22% again are unaware of esports or have heard of such a thing. But clearly, with a population of our size, the awareness increase, it means that there's that much more market space for this big groups to enter into and to focus and target India. Just like India has been a target for anything from e-shopping to sports, you name it, India is becoming a global market for all of these people. And the reasons are there, right? I'll just talk about it. There is tremendous opportunity. So just taking numbers from this year itself, there's been at least an 80% growth seen during April and May 2020, simply because of the lockdown, right? So what are people actually getting involved in? A lot of people are getting involved into casual gaming and arcade gaming, right? This is your standard games that you don't need to invest time in building teams, or, you don't take on tasks. It's just something that you can do as simple as playing Ludo, which has become one of the most popular games titles, and is, top of every download charts, to things like casino gaming, right? Where a new market has evolved almost for users who are willing to kind of spend some money or actually bet on something, right? Zynga Poker was perhaps one of its foremost games at its time, but it still continues to hold 200 million players worldwide. In that India market with casino games, the number of games have all been adapted to India. Rummy has become a very popular game online. Team Patti has seen a variant of that game running, and people are willing to spend some money, to to earn some more money based on, how they play the game. So that's a big tie-in as well. The geographical locations, if you see, largely leaving out the east of India, a big population of the country, it's evenly spread, right? So almost 30+% in the north and the south, and the west obviously trailing back in 26th. Obvious reasons, East India is at 8%. Infrastructure not the very best. Internet connections, those kind of things will probably not be the very best as you go up northeast. So that's probably one of the reasons for this. And I think the key number there is that the mobile phone experience is becoming the primary focus, primary device, not just for gaming, but at Sports Interactive, we build out fan engagements across multiple different verticals. It could be websites, apps, but the focus has clearly been mobile first for a lot of these brands, of a lot of these clients who are very sure and focused that most of our content is now consumed on a mobile phone. The most painful tasks that you once had to do by mobile phones are somehow being optimized for you to do on your mobile, right? That's the big focus. Technology has moved into that, into that frame. UI and UX has moved towards that frame where how do you hook on the user immediately, send him a push notification, send him an SMS, but convert him as a user almost instantaneously by providing an excellent mobile first experience. Lots of games have actually just transitioned to being only an app only game and not having a desktop version, not having, a web version, because it's easier to connect with your users, right, on mobile. You're able to communicate to them in real time. You're able to talk to them through push notifications. You can remind them there's something happening. Shows like KBC went into mobile screens, where users could actually play while the contestants were sitting on in the venue there while the shoot was going on. All of these kind of things have kind of translated into high consumption on mobile devices. And as the numbers show you, it's not only the male players which were traditionally the dominating. Female gamers have been growing in India's audiences up to 10% in the 8 to 24 year age group, and even at the 45%, 45 plus years group, if you see, there's a high 10% users from the female sphere, right? And this is all tied down to your mobile phones becoming so much more useful, so much more helpful. You've got time on your hands. You're either playing a game of Ludo or Word Crunch or something like this. It's all translating into money somewhere somehow for the title, for the platform and everything else, right? And what have been India's favorite games? Well, the new generation, Gen Z as we call them, has got casual games, board games and arcade games, whereas millennials are more action games and casual games. And the Gen X is perhaps more tied into the traditional, what we played way back then, to card games and your arcade games as well as your board games. So what exactly are the growth drivers in India? If I can just spend some moments talking about this. Firstly, our digital infrastructure has grown like fivefold, right, in the past 10 years, I'd say. From struggling with 2G connections to now having 4G, and talks about 5G getting in, but fiber optics, cable internet some years ago. And just the speed has been, the speed of internet has been so good, and the cost of data has been excellent. If you had to compare this with any of the so-called countries in Europe, where you pay a premium for actually surfing internet on your phones using traditional LTE 4G connections. India is perhaps one of the cheapest places to get an internet connection on your mobile phone, with 1 GB a day, almost at 30 GB a month. Consumption of anything digital has now increased fourfold. Few years ago, you'd probably never use YouTube on your mobile phones because you'd worry that your pack would expire in a day or two. But now with the number of data, the amount of data that is available or given to you by the likes of Vodafone, Jio in the market right now, it's you don't even think twice about it. Add to that the cost of getting an Wi-Fi connection at your home is probably dropped down with decent speeds of 25, 50 Mbps available to you quite easily. So that is in one of the reasons is one of the biggest growth drivers, and which will also ensure that gaming, e-gaming, esports as a platform is going to be on the rise. The second important part of this is the favorable demographics. So clearly a lot of, it's about 40+% of the population in India is, between that age group that can be targeted for esports. And the fact is that as we grow up, our rising disposable income has increased tremendously. Personally born in the 80s with limited, money from my parents to buy an ice cream or buy something like that was something that, we'd always think about back then. But now kids these days, I wouldn't even say kids, you basically opportunities to work quicker, you start soon, you get money, you're spending. Your parents would have probably told you in my time, we saved this much money, we tried to do this, we never went out, we didn't go to malls. But with the whole scenario, with all that we've been exposed to, it's a completely different scenario right now. So there's a rising disposable income that users have because of, they're taking up jobs, but they're also looking to spend as much, as they make in most cases. And, a lot in those days, the money that you would save would go into, things like planning for a house and, those kind of future thoughts. Well, as right now, I think me included, think about, okay, where's my next holiday going to be, or what is the best device that I can get? What should I be investing in terms of my next device or my next phone? So that obviously is another big factor for why gaming is going to be, as a big in India very soon, very shortly. The next thing I think is again tied into the fact that this Indian market is a big growing market. And the big international organizers all want to get involved in it simply because if it's a tip of the iceberg right now with percentages as low as 10% of users actually, playing and then paying for a game. But the idea is as this gets more popular and this gets, moves away from just the cities to going further down to B cities, C cities, the number of people that can be targeted is just, so much more higher. Also with things going digital, payments, wallets, it's easy to now do a transaction and, relatively safer. 10 years ago, if you had to tell your parents, well, you need to do an online transaction and you need to do this to kind of buy something online, they'd give you looks. But now even they're buying into the idea of things like Paytm and Amazon Pay and, spending money online and things like that. So these are all tied in. And obviously, like I said, there's an increase in investments simply because the market in India is a market that is largely untapped, and there's endless possibilities of what could happen once the right game comes along and unlocks that interest in the users. And the last bit for this is, I think something that's also very relevant now is that it's now become a viable career option to think about gaming, right? And this is not just game development. We're working in companies like Sports Interactive or, EA Sports, who have an office in Bangalore or Hyderabad. But it's even an opportunity for people to become professional gamers, right? If you're really good at it, there's an opportunity. You can join a team. It's almost like Formula One racing, where you are paid to race. You get a salary to race a car. You get a salary to, play your favorite video game in these tournaments that are owned by teams that participate in tournaments year round for millions of dollars of prize money. Your opportunities to be part of these teams, games that require teams of 3, 4, largely are set up. And I've heard of Indonesia being a big hub, Malaysia another one, where actually these companies are created that own teams, and they get gamers across from different countries actually live there. Everything is taken care of. All they do is play games and join these tournaments from time to time. And obviously, like I said, the prize monies are in thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, if not even millions of dollars at a larger scales. So it's clearly becoming a viable career option as well. So this is one of the big focuses why there is belief that esports will grow in India. That being said, there are still some challenges to overcome, and regulatory challenges are the biggest ones. Paid money gaming, for example, Dream 11 won its case in court to say that it was a game of skill, not a game of chance. So essentially, people could put money and play gaming and win lakhs of prizes, if not crores, as they claim. But there are regulatory challenges, for real money gaming that will kick in. There is no body that regulates everything, as just like you'd have the BCCI, which sets guidelines for cricket in India. Right now, there's no such thing. So there will always be regulatory challenges when real money gaming or, such effective forms of gaming come in. Monetization challenge, the Indian market, again, the problem is to get sponsors to spend money. Your traditional sponsors, for example, like your Coke, even if you look at regular brands, Indian brands, may let it be, like a Godrej or even a Dove or any of these kind of businesses are not going to essentially want to put money immediately into these kind of products, because essentially they will not see return on investment, as they call ROI, immediately on these things. It's going to take some time. So until the market builds up really well, it's going to be a little difficult. Geographical expansion hasn't really happened in India, right? Right now, if there are games, there's a national level competition that happens, but nothing like cricket, where there's a T20 league in Mumbai, there's a T20 league even in Bangalore or Karnataka Premier League, Tamil Nadu Premier League, small leagues that are taking place. Right now, with gaming, that's still largely at a level where people involved in this are, either at a national level through some brand activation that has happened. So until geographical expansion happens, and like that chart earlier showed you, it needs to truly spread for it to become a lot more popular than it currently is. But the fact is that, there is that increased interest, and it's a matter of time, rather when would it happen. I touched upon this briefly with the regulatory challenges. There are no associations, right? If I was an advertiser, I could go to BCCI and say, okay, I'd like to sponsor this much money. I've got this much money and I want this kind of a promotion based on, on the games you run or the tournaments you hold. With esports currently, without an association in place, it's a bit of a gray area. Again, there are steps being taken towards that, and there is, platforms like Dream 11, which don't have esports right now, but actually have gone ahead and created associations for fantasy games and things like that. So there is definitely thought in that process to try and regulate all of this and bring that under one umbrella. So that is definitely something that could happen in the future. And the last bit is general lack of awareness. So, not everybody is aware of these kind of games or what this is all about. To be honest, when we look for people to join our organization and we talk to people from tech backgrounds for roles, it's sometimes a difficult task to try and explain to them, because it's not yet mainstream, right? It's not gone mainstream yet, and until that happens, it's going to be difficult to educate all types of people. But the good point about all of this is that, there is definitely a large interest in this. To give you some sense, and I can't reveal names, but a big brand that's actually already involved with IPL actually wanted to do an event, on-ground event across multiple cities that involved gamers coming, playing. So it was a combination of building a platform for users to play, along with on-ground events that would happen across multiple cities to kind of bring the best gamers together and have a competition in India, right? Now, this is brands that are not traditionally have been thinking about doing this, but they are all thinking about going this route. If you've seen recently, Hotstar Streams has been streaming tournaments from esports. The Sony guys actually went one step ahead and broadcasted on their channels the E-Champions League that goes on. The key matches have been actually streamed live. So that's another, that's another move in the right direction. And, clearly we are obviously behind Europe and Southeast Asia, where the markets are big, in America, of course. But India is going to be a big focus for a lot of brands, a lot of these companies, a lot of these titles who own of these titles. PUBG contests, Counter Strike, the likes of those are going to only grow over the next few years. Because if I went a slide behind, you'd see that all of these things are going to drive growth in India, and eventually we're going to reach to a spot where it's a big sizable chunk of the market that will exist. With sports actually taking a back seat because of the COVID situation, a lot of this focus has now moved on to esports, and people doing things from their house itself, and which serves as a next segue to seeing what exactly has been done by esports during the COVID situation.
Gaming is right now not mainstream as of right now.
Right.
So, in my opinion, the gaming is becoming a mainstream only if there are enough viewership and enough streamers to engage those kind of audience. For example, cricket is the most viewed sport in India, but it is not the most played sport in India. So, for
Right.
that, I believe that to engage that phenomenon that gaming is mainstream, we definitely have to make sure that the content delivered during those esports is better.
That is correct. I think if you see, if you see titles that have come out, people just talk about Brian Lara cricket and the Cricket 99 and things like that. I think the focus of cricket hasn't been that big in companies like EA Sports, simply because FIFA takes up perhaps most of their attention, and sports like NBA and things like that for the European market. A new gaming title comes out once every couple of years, but there's not much changes in it. That being said, the focus is because the cricket market itself is limited to 10 countries who play cricket worldwide, and India is probably the most popular of those countries. England, Australia, not far behind, but again, in terms of the titles that are out for cricket, aren't many. But I'm sure that that's going to change. And if you go down to if you leave out the big players like the EA Sports of this world, companies that are publishing games on direct platforms like Apple's iStore and Android, Google Play stores, you'll see that there are a lot many more cricket games that are coming out with with engaging content, right? And now, if you see the focus, there's a strategy games that are coming in place with cricket, putting you in the shoes of a captain, deciding what to do. I think the focus clearly is going to be that, yes, recognizing that cricket is, if you need to get into India, cricket's going to be one of the games you develop, and do a good job like you would do with a FIFA title. And the second bit is also, just focusing on perhaps other sport. So, again, not looking at, unable to divulge any more information, but Kabaddi is again a focus area for some groups of people within the country. We're looking at doing something in the Kabaddi space, because clearly the Kabaddi viewership for PKL shocked everybody, right? Nobody expected it to be off the roof like it was season 1, season 2. Yes, it's kind of peaked and it's perhaps reached a plateau at this point in time, but the numbers were surely so, viewership numbers especially was so high, it basically became the second most popular sport after cricket, right? And for the longest time ever, you'd think football would be that popular sport, because largely based on pockets of belts, Bengal, Karnataka, Goa, Kerala being big spots for football. But actually, it turned out that Kabaddi actually took a surprise second spot in the last few years in becoming a popular sport. And while gamers may not have a game right now, I think our focus is going to be on indigenous games. Games like, I don't know, if you guys have ever played online games, but Rummy 24/7, Indianized version of card games have become highly popular. Teen Patti is another example that's becoming popular. And all of the regulatory boards are awaiting, the moment, and it's perhaps somewhere down the line that there will be some legalized form of gambling that would probably be allowed. A lot of the casino businesses are waiting to come into India, start off, with operations, online operations. So you can't technically place a bet on Bet365 while sitting in India. There are methods to, of course, to do it, but it's not mainstream yet. But once regulations like these are lifted, then the focus for all of these players too is also going to be the Indian market, and a lot of this is going to mean translating into what do Indians really want, how do we get that that extra dollar from them, and that's going to be a lot of focus there as well. And like you rightly pointed, I think it needs to grow. Cricket needs to grow. Online cricket needs to grow. A lot. Currently, things like Fortnite, PUBG are probably the most popular games in India. But there's no reason why these games and organizing of even these kind of games are going to get larger in scale because of just the sheer number of audiences, right? For example, my 12-year-old nephew has been playing PUBG. Whether he should be or not, again, debatable question. But he spends his time watching YouTube, looking at all of these different sorts of videos, right? And this is all translating into that market where there is a dollar to be spent, because YouTube's again gaining money from people like this watching all of this content. So if you can bring all of this together through the gaming experience, I think eventually the Indian market is going to become one of those big markets for the gaming industry to really focus. And again, it's not just, I not briefly talked mostly about here in this case was esports, but generally the gaming market is going to, online casino gaming and all of those things are just going to skyrocket in the next few years. So, yeah, I think moving on then, just to talk a little bit about what esports have been doing during COVID, right? Winston Churchill, the erstwhile Prime Minister, of England said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think the crisis that the coronavirus situation put us all in, gave us all an opportunity to take a step back and introspect. At Sports Interactive, we got on to doing things that we would have loved to do, but never have the time to, because we are so operationally driven with all of the clients that we work with and service. We've actually taken a step back and built out these kind of casual games, casino-based gaming, things like that. Even going on to virtual stuff that I'll showcase you later. But at our level, at Sports Interactive's level, we've kind of pivoted some of our earlier plans of building out the kinds of platforms of fan engagements to something that's going to mean it's a digital fan experience now, because fans are largely going to be at home. They can't be in stadiums, whether it's an ISL tournament that happens or an IPL. We've got to face it. Even Champions League football and things like that are all taking a backseat. It's the real thought is, the real scary part of this all is that it's going to be played behind closed doors for most part of this year. And how do you keep fans engaged? So I think the focus there also for us is kindly pivoted to that, and I'll talk more about it in that direction. But just looking at the brands, and I'm just going to pick 4 examples, because if I go through, there has been a bunch of different things that are that could come up here. But what got the most attraction? TikTok, not necessarily for the right reasons, of course, but also the fact that people like David Warner and things like that got involved in TikTok and Instagram, one-on-one conversations, things like this. But the other things that also went viral, these big leagues that are all involved in actual on-ground sports decided to do things like these, right? So the Premier League was one of the first ever to start this, and they went official by doing 15 matches, involved players, celebrities, a combination of those two. And it ran for about 5 days, the first version that ran. Sky bought rights for this to broadcast it, and had 70,000 average TV viewers per match, which is like a phenomenal number if you consider that, this is 2 people playing the game and you're actually watching it. Overall, on the scale of the whole tournament across web and on TV, there was about 150 million viewers that actually consumed content based on this. So clearly, one of the first early steps was taken in April for this, as soon as lockdown kind of kicked in and people realized this was like a on the spur of the moment tournament. They used the money that they collected, as a means to donate to charities. But overall, it was a good feel-good factor for Premier League to get involved in something like this. Formula One actually ran a whole series of 8 races. Again, Sky Sports, broadcaster got some value out of it. Whether they bought rights or not, I'm not really aware of this. But clearly, it's about delivering some value right now. Sky Sports, the likes of Sky Sports, the likes of Star Sports, they pay millions of dollars, sometimes in billions in Sky's cases for Premier League rights. But suddenly there's nothing to broadcast. How do you kind of help your partners along with this? And this is classic example of using online games, esports to kind of deliver some value to your clients. 8 races, 30 million views, and 695 million impressions across social media. So clearly talked about, celebrities got involved in this, people talking, they had celebrity racers. As you can see, Aguero actually took on a challenge, all bringing this together through, virtually sitting at home and actually, playing a console game. And all of them, to be honest, like us average players, average Joes across the world also faced internet issues and couldn't complete races. And it was quite funny and engaging content that came out of this. Basketball was the next one that actually featured. They used obviously the official title, the NBA play title, to create a tournament for them, which ran across 3 days and had about 17 national teams participating, and players across 114 players across these teams participated. They went ahead and broadcasted 54 of these games, right? And this was simultaneous broadcast happening on Facebook. They have their own basketball.tv app that they used, but there was 100 plus broadcast distributions. Now, just talking about this, just to put that into perspective, this means 100 different channels across Europe, Asia, whatever, were broadcasting something, and they had about 40 broadcast hours, live broadcast hours that they actually went through. Interaction again was great for them. 5 million social media views, sponsor-led activations were done. So really brings you back to the thought that you can drive much more value to your sponsors even in these kind of times when you can't run activities, you can't have on-ground matches going on, but there's definitely some way to kind of compensate for this problem that we face. So esports clearly has been leading the way, and cricket had its own little bit. It was more of a challenge, ran a series and anything. But 5 matches, 9 players got involved, the likes of Maxwell, Broad, former cricketers as well, and done at a smaller scale, as you can see from the numbers. But a brand like Betway, a betting brand, got behind it and organized it, brought all of these former cricketers or some current cricketers even together to play, and garnered some decent views. They used YouTube to stream, largely used the platform from YouTube, but also tied up with a brand to kind of bring that all together from a whole holistic perspective. So focus again clearly has been on, how do you drive value in this time to your sponsors? How do you keep your fans engaged? Probably the single most important part of this. You don't want them losing interest. So how do you keep them engaged to some nice content? And esports served that on a platter because they were able to bring, the likes of Raheem Sterling, the likes of Aguero to play. Celebrities got involved, rappers, musicians, tied into, all kinds of interest across genres, so that, as a football enthusiast, even, and a music enthusiast, I could want to get involved in and watch some of the content that was on offer. So, and really, there's a ton of stuff that people have done. I've just done 4 examples in the interest of time, but an excellent example of adapting what you can do with strategy is the e-racing. The e-racing federation actually ran marble racing. Yes, they raced marbles. Marbles represented teams that are part of the racing, the racing calendar. They actually ran 6 or so races with marble racing, built out a whole racetrack, almost Lego-esque like. And teams really did everything from qualifying to actually taking part in a race, and it garnered again millions of views. But because just for being smart content at the time, commentary was put in, everything they did production value as though it was actually an actual race that was going on, and an Indian team, Mahindra Racing, was actually involved in this as well, because they are normally involved in that e-racing series that is done by the FIA. If you get a chance, do Google it. Perhaps I can share those links separate. It's quite an interesting watch to see how people are actually thinking laterally across, what could be done in such a COVID situation. The first part that I'm going to talk about is Sports Interactive involvement. So why would Sports Interactive, who's traditionally been a digital agency for sports that builds out websites, fan gaming engagements, but all data-led gaming, right? We've never invested in building a team to build out the likes of a FIFA game or a stick cricket, even equivalent of those kind of things, right? So suddenly COVID-19 thrust upon us, and a lot of us, a lot of our usual plans would have been put to bed. But rather than sit and wait for it, I think one of our key values is innovation, and hence we realized very quickly that we wanted to deliver to our fans something in the esports, in the esports genre that would help, just perhaps build out a whole new set of suite of games that we could eventually look to kind of deploy for clients across, right? So that was one of the reasons. And obviously the recognition is that the future, this is going to be big. So rather than be an adopter or following somebody, we thought, why not be an innovator and start off with a few things, right? So basically as a team of about 400 odd people at Sports Interactive, what is it that we could do is what we thought about. And our aim, again, simple aim is, we are all fans. At Sports Interactive, we don't call ourselves employees. We actually call ourselves players, and all 400 odd players, are in some way of a sports fan, a sports nut. And, anything that we build, we look at with the focus of how does it make it engaging or exciting for the people who will actually consume it. And in most cases, it is us, because we are the audience that we want to serve as well. So with esports, the idea was continue to revolutionize the sports fan experience, which is one of our key, vision statements that we keep in mind whenever we are delivering fan experiences. What are we doing to revolutionize that sports fan experience? So what are the moves we are making? Simply put, there are a bunch of different things across these four verticals. So very simple, player versus player prize money tournament. So imagine you're able to pay an entry fee of, let's call it 10 rupees to play a virtual game with somebody. It could be a streaming game on a console, or it could be a game that could be built out. If you beat your friend or whoever this was over whatever length of the match was, you stand to gain some money. So, this was player versus player prize money tournaments, virtual simulations for betting and fantasy market. So the betting industry has obviously taken a very big hit, right? The biggest problem with this being there are no matches for users to punt on, right? And usually traditional forms of betting, allow you from cricket, football, tennis to a whole variety of sports to even things like, dog racing, for example, in America. But suddenly with this COVID situation, there was nothing, that betting platforms could offer in terms of real-time bets. Simulated gambling is still an option, but for the audience that's so used to betting on matches, betting on outcomes, there was this need, and hence we actually ran virtual simulations. So imagine an India team playing a Pakistan team, and betting platform actually taking bets on this with regards to who would win the match, top scorer, things like that. And then obviously the fantasy markets that exist, the Dream 11 type fantasy markets, also had an interest in something like this. But the way we did it with them is that we actually did something called Rewind Fantasy. So users got clues as to guess which kind of match it was going to be. Clues largely brought it down to saying perhaps it's a CPL match involving these two teams that was played on, let's say, XYZ venue. So at the end of the 3 clues that were revealed at a timely basis, you would perhaps know which match it was, and you were able to pick a team. And the match ran as a simulation, not a simulation, but ran as a highlights. But you got points in real time even based on those highlights. So if your player scored a 4, your points increased by 4. If you got a wicket, you got 30 points, and your leaderboards went up and down in real time, and they actually give out money. Of course, virtual currency through the digital platform that they own, but they wanted to keep fans engaged, and this is one of the ways that we kind of help them with it. The other bit is live streaming, scorecards, commentary. This traditional things that we usually have for normal matches that happen. We actually streamed matches that were being played, simulated, or being played by actual users. And there was actually viewership for this as well. So we had scorecards that went online, a whole tournament that happened, a virtual tournament that happened, 5-over tournament that happened, and users could watch the streaming online, catch up on scorecard and commentary and things like that. And finally, there was content creation for branding and marketing. So essentially just using a lot of the streaming possibilities to recreate stuff. So for example, if you could use the cricket game that exists to replay the India-West Indies match from 1983, the final, as a T20 match, what would happen, right? So this kind of engaging suddenly this kind of content, how it would play out, you put some nuances and were able to simulate what a match like that would turn out to be. It helped for brands who wanted to stay involved in sport but really didn't have anything on sport to talk about. So this is, this kind of things are some of the moves that we were making.
Dream 11 has undoubtedly established itself very well in the fantasy gaming vertical with a very user-friendly interface.
Right.
They're also the official gaming partners for regional leagues like TNPL, KPL, Mumbai PL. So, but this has not stopped the new players from entering the market. What do these new companies need to do to tackle the monopoly that companies like Dream 11 enjoy right now?
Oh, excellent question, and a very difficult question. One that we struggle to answer ourselves because we actually work with clients who we actually have platforms that we've built out that actually do some things that are similar to Dream 11. We actually provide data to a bunch of these KheloPlayIndia.com or MyCircle11.com. So see, clearly, I think Dream 11 has reached a space where they are probably untouchable, and the next likes of Hala Play, MyCircle11, and the likes like those also realize that perhaps Dream 11 is currently untouchable. What they are, however, fighting for is that there is a bigger audience to be tapped into, audience that currently is not involved in fantasy gaming or any of these gaming activities because of whatever reasons. It could be lack of awareness to lack of infrastructure available to them to do this. But the fact of the matter is this is all going to come to fruition someday soon, right? The other point that they are also trying to do is to get involved into sports that don't necessarily involve, where Dream 11 are begin. Not an easy task to do currently, given that Dream 11 is actually forayed into football, as also forayed into kabaddi, and perhaps are looking at revenue streams also coming in from there. But languages is something that's a big focus. If the Bengali market is a big market for me, can I do a Bengal language specific fantasy game? Because Dream 11 clearly does not offer that. Hindi is another big language, of course, with a big audience. People may understand more. You could perhaps look at involving more people from that kind of hinterland market in the UP, Madhya Pradesh regions, to get in more people with using language. But I think the underlying fact is that you need to be innovative to some extent to saying what can be the next version of fantasy gaming be. Daily fantasy has evolved into what it is currently is actually more like a match fantasy with entry money. It's going to be very, very difficult to take on Dream 11 head on. And I don't think even all the players put together can actually do this. The key is going to be innovation now to try and create a market that's different from what Dream 11 is, right? Whether it is simpler versions of games that still qualify as skill-based, because you need to be skill-based gaming, right? You can't say, okay, predict the winner of the match, put 50 rupees, and if you're right, we'll give you 75 rupees. That's clearly not going to work. That comes under the betting purview. But that is another big focus for these kind of players, right? So we work with a couple of people who are waiting for gambling to become legal. They've got a user base, maybe not as close to Dream 11's 10 million users or a million active users weekly, but they've got decent enough sizable numbers to go to the likes of Betway, Bet365 when they come along. When betting does get legal, saying, hey, these are the registered users we have. These are users that have already paid money and are seemingly willing to gamble because they have put money on fantasy gaming. These are your niche targeted audience, and suddenly that has got so much more value than running a campaign across the country, trying to bring in people to a gambling platform, which is perhaps a learning experience, only 80 to 90% of that audience. So, there are a couple of plays here in taking on Dream 11. A is innovation. I think you need to innovate with a gaming format that can be perhaps quicker. We've discussed games like actually having, 4-player fantasy games for 6 overs rather than playing the whole 20 overs. So can I actually have 2 or 3 different teams created per match and faster returns, faster, investment in money, but I don't have to wait for 20 overs, 40 overs for a match to end and for me to get my money. So these are some of the high-level discussions that are going on. And again, the key is going to be innovation. What is it that is going to take users and help them adapt to something being as simple as that, right? At Sports Interactive, we've looked at and digitalizing a game as simple as Housey. The lotto game that is popular in North America, Housey, as it is known in India, where you get a ticket of numbers. Few seasons ago, when PKL was wanted to do a digital activation, we actually converted the Housey game into a digital Housey for Kabaddi, which actually had a ticket that had different events. Now these events, you needed to watch the game and then tick them off the ticket after having seen the event happen in the match. Applied to cricket, could be applied to football, could easily be applied to depending on legality issues. It could also mean that at cricket you could create your own ticket and say, okay, these are for the first 10 overs. I'm going to bet 10 rupees that these 5 events are going to happen. Now again, whether it's a game of skill or a game of luck, I think it's a little bit, it's a little bit in doubt at this point in time. But you need to think on those lines, right? What are users so used to doing in their daily lives? How can you incentivize them to come here and play a game and make some money? There's no stopping you buying coins in Ludo with actual no reward with those coins that you win. But if you're out of chances, you still spend money to buy some coins so that you can play some more. Clearly people are looking to spend or are willing to spend money and not looking, but rather willing to spend some money. I think the key is going to be innovation and what drives them. Dream 11, obviously, with investment from Tencent and the likes of that, Mahendra Singh Dhoni being probably the single biggest factor in them getting as big as they are currently, right? Dhoni being as popular as he is, it was a master stroke. I don't think that can be repeated, by anybody else by bringing somebody on board to kind of do something as similar as they did, right? They basically bought Dhoni, whose image itself is enough for people to just be a user, can get converted to becoming a user. I don't think there's a celebrity like that that's going to, and people have tried with Sanjay Manjrekar being the more intellectual guy to Ganguly, the more emotional guy. Yuvraj Singh has been looped in with one of the clients we work with. Brett Lee's very recently, I don't know if there was an announcement just made, Brett Lee's just got involved with a company called Sports Adda that we work with. I don't really think that anybody has the marketing value of Dhoni that Dhoni has. Perhaps Kohli comes a little bit close to that, but I don't think, from the way it seems, it's not like it's something that he would be taking up anytime soon though. But innovation, I think that's number one. And I think if you had to look at number two, I think it has to be, looking at markets that currently don't exist or Dream 11 is not tapped into. How do you bring those guys into play?
India has tried to invest previously in niche sports areas, specifically in the F1 area where they had tried to launch 3 Grand Prix India races. And also apart from that, in the esports sector where MTV and Ronnie Screwvala had did a collaboration to, broadcast UCypher esports tournament. But those investments, in all of our opinions, are actually right now decommissioned and was quite a disaster. So what exactly will be the road ahead where investments in these particular areas where these esports are being broadcasted can be actually pull off successfully?
So, okay, I think let's tackle this in two pieces, right? Formula One, the big disaster, fiasco, if you had to ask me. Um, the market was simply not there for to actually host a Grand Prix race. While it's a big prestigious thing, the Indian audience clearly isn't somebody. I don't think if you had to put digital population even, I don't think you'd struggle to find 10% of digital population interested in Formula One, right? And forget you're not even considering the 80% of the people who probably have never heard of Formula One. In my opinion, it was an aim and attempt to kind of bring India on a roadmap, and countries that have taken races either have a strong backing of Formula One, as in racing is either in their genes or blood through teams that have been part of their history, drivers who've been historically very famous, or simply because the culture of racing has existed. India never had a racing culture, right? Of course, we had a couple of drivers, but let's be honest, Karthikeyan was never going to reach the podium unless it was a lucky race that he actually got onto that. Audiences aren't tuned in to watch, spending that much of time watching a race, seeing it in venue where you actually see cars for a few seconds every few minutes zip by you. I don't think the Indian audience is there for that. Yes, there will be a cream and a niche, but clearly it's not a mass audience that you're looking at. So I think Formula One, unfortunately, was a bad step at a wrong point in time. And I wouldn't even recommend anybody thinking of getting into Formula One racing from organizing races right here in India, right? I think, yes, programs to build out drivers and the skills and capabilities, and Indian is eventually going to be on the cusp of getting there and should, hopefully get there and have to do a much better job than Karthikeyan did. But infrastructure wise, setting up these kind of events is definitely never going to be a viable event to have a race in India. If you look at countries that took this new, Bahrain, UAE, Abu Dhabi, they've all built it around a whole tourism, the whole tourism story is built around it, right? Singapore, for example, you go for the race, you see this, you do this, you do this, you do that. Whereas when the Indian race came by, it was okay, the circuit's far away. What are the other things to do? Are you going to actually get people visiting India to watch a race? Truth be told, I doubt it. They'd rather go to Singapore. They'd rather go to places like Formula One. They've built it out as an experience rather than just coming for the race. There's so much more to do. I don't think at India we were able to do anything of that sort. So that unfortunately is something that I don't think is successful. When you talk about esports, again ahead of its time, Ronnie Screwvala did try something with MTV. Clearly, MTV has pivoted. If you see content-wise, they pivoted from being music to so much more youth-centric, youth-focused, with shows and other things like that. I think they've taken a small step. I think clearly the audience is going to grow and they're going to become mature audiences. So by mature, I mean people who've played this not on a whim and a fancy. Acha, my friend told me this is a good game, download it, played it for some time and got fed up of it. But actually people who are in tune to it, people who make purchases, all of those numbers from that you look at is a growing number, and the market and the audience is clearly increasing, right? With that focus in mind, I think identifying that niche and what is the kind of games that you want to get involved with will be critical. I think anybody getting involved in this is not going to jump in anymore and say, okay, let's just do this for the sake of doing it. Or PUBG is big right now in India, let's do a PUBG Fortnite / tournament. But I think there will be focus to build out platforms that will enable you to have multiple sets of gaming. That you could think about it as if you are interested in first-person shooting games or role-playing games, there's something there for you. If you're interested in sports, there's something there for you. So I think there will be serious amount of time spent, and probably already has been, in researching what's going to happen. Where are the markets they're going to need to target? They can't target everywhere. It can't become it's not going to become a one-size-fits-all. It's going to need to be as on a custom solution, and in India is going to be something which is a country where they're going to need to customize a lot of what they do, whether it is content creation, language specific barriers, those kind of things are all going to need some time and thought into it. And then, just bringing great production values when they actually bring broadcast of of all of these things into India. If you look at the likes of Twitch, right, and if you look at the likes of Mixer, there's so much that they've built on top of their platforms, and there is ability to build on top by third-party developers like us, right? If a client comes to us saying, I want to implement something with Twitch, we can look to actually do gaming on top of that, where users are able to predict or do some activity based on what the actual first-person shooters are, the guys playing the games are doing. So, you know, the immersive experience is something that's going to be big whenever this kicks in. The reason for this to get involved in money obviously is going to be a big factor. The tournaments are going to showcase that you can earn a lot of money, and you know, this is going to become more mainstream from as a career option, both developing games, working in you know, what my segment next talks about, the opportunities to work in gaming, but also just as an opportunity to become a gamer in this kind of scenario. So it's going to be a closely knit plan and strategy. I think the way I look at it is, a broadcaster like Star will probably tie up with a production house and then talk to titles that will already exist that are popular, and then kind of look to develop custom content, create custom events and things like that eventually to build out the whole segment. It will take some time. There's no, you know, there's no reason to believe it's something that could happen clearly in the next 6 months, but over the next period of 2 years or so, I think there's going to be strides in that side of things. But I think to answer your question, I think there is going to be a need, like I said, to identify, and perhaps the research is already underway, if I know right, before somebody makes a move into this market, with just making sure that, you know, what the offering that they come with is the correct offering that wears a lot of hats and can fit a lot of different kinds of users, gamers that are in this market. So these were just some examples of what we've actually done. So quickly just talk to you too. So I think just 2 examples of what we were working on in the lockdown. The second example, the virtual simulation that you've seen, was what I was talking about. It was actually some of the games that you know, we played out, simulated, streamed across platforms. Betting went to data that went to betting sites, and you know, we had match centers and scorecards and immersive experience of the video even playing out on scorecards through this game. The previous one that we did talk about is the E-Cricket Championship. The E-Cricket Championship was actually something that was conceptualized and has been in discussion now as a tournament to be held. You know, bring together brands, bring together influencers, bring together different, perhaps even a broadcaster on board, and actually run something like this by, you know, with a bigger play on how this can be, you know, how this can be made much bigger than it really is at this point in time, but using on the ground people to actually play the game, log into a platform, be able to play the game and take on, and literally run this as a World Cup tournament over a period of 2 to 3 weeks. So these were just 2 of the things. One is more on an idea basis that we've been discussing, but the other is something that's actually gone to market. Sports Adda, the brand I was talking to you about, is one of them who've involved with them, and through their betting arm, they've actually onboarded this as an option to bet for players, for the casual betting fans that they also have on their platforms. And I'll quickly then move on to, I think, what is perhaps relevant, important as well, just to discuss on what exactly are the opportunities that exist if you had to talk about, you know, career opportunities in the industry. Now, these are largely broken down into category A, which is management. Perhaps the most relevant one here at this point in time, and perhaps the one that's most popular or more mainstream, is product managers. Essentially, the product manager's role is to ensure that, you know, key stakeholders that have given them inputs are taken into consideration, and the product kind of is built out with this focus. There's also, you know, important things to think about in a role of a product manager, is to understand the needs that he's serving for with his product. What exactly is that product doing? What's the value it's bringing? And, you know, at certain times this role even expands to thinking more strategically in terms of pricing, in terms of money, in terms of revenues it could bring in. But largely, I think the role for a product manager is to know the nitty-gritties of what exactly that's going to be built out, and why they're being built out, what are the features and functionalities that are important in the games, or in general it is with whatever products that you work with, right? The second bit under management is something called as a community manager. Again, this one is a little not so mainstream, and the roles can be overlapped with a product manager, but the community manager essentially is working towards ensuring that the title once released, the feedback that is sought out, how is that kind of applied, how does that inputs go back to the product manager, but evolving the product in based on user feedback, real time feedback. Obviously, I don't mean like you make a change within 2 weeks that you launch a game, but how all of that translates into what's going to be the upgrade, what's going to be the changes, what's the sentiment that comes through from users who are playing the game, how do you improve that experience so that the user keeps coming back to the game, to the platform that you built out. Then there is a techno-functional role. I think this kind of a role is ideally suited for somebody who comes with a tech background, perhaps has done a B.Tech and then goes on to do a management course or an MBA. But a techno-functional roles that exist is a producer. So in the gaming industry, they are called producers of games, known as a project manager in layman's terms. The role is simple: to work with the product manager to ensure that he is able to deliver what he is expected to. As a producer, the job is to make sure that designs come back on time. And if there's any permissions need to be sorted, any clarifications required, look at it at a holistic view of somebody who's the role of the producer is largely to make sure that everything is streamlined. There is no pain points. Is there any obstructions to development? He's the person who's getting it sorted out and ensuring that things work out. He's almost like a conduit between the stakeholder and the product manager to ensure that delivery happens. And there are different types of roles in different organizations. If you are a service provider to a third party, like in our case, if you are Sports Interactive, as a project manager, you are liaising with the client, who's your key stakeholder, but you're also liaising with the account managers. You're liaising with key people from the company that you work with, also invested, to ensure that the product delivery, the project that the product manager is capable of working without any hindrances, whether it is getting approvals on time, dependencies on other third parties. All of this kind of thing is taken care by the project manager / producer in the gaming industry. The other role that also qualifies to be a techno-functional role is that of a Scrum Master. And I'm not sure of how many people have heard about Scrum Master, but this role has basically evolved or actually introduced through a type of project management methodology called Agile. In Agile, you simply means that you've got let's say 10 tasks to complete, but you're able to prioritize and pick what you need to complete first. And if you have any hindrances, essentially these are taken care of, and essentially can be you can reprioritize based on new things that come up to you. The very focus of Agile is literally being Agile and saying, okay, today I have to work on this, but if I have not got this, I can actually take up something else and work. In Agile, you tend to work with sprints, which is a typical duration of a week or 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, you define what you're going to deliver, and that's what you work with. So essentially, a Scrum Master is a role that was defined as part of this framework, and a lot of companies, development-based companies, focus on agile development, and a Scrum Master is essentially one that is overseeing both the developers and the product manager to ensure that they are equipped to deliver to the best every sprint on sprint. It helps to have some technical background, so you understand the nuances of development, and you're also able to preempt and understand, okay, this is going to be a problem if I don't solve for this dependency pretty soon. So it needs you to think on your feet with both a focus on what's important for the product if you have to prioritize, as well as what's important, as from a dev perspective, how to be able to prioritize things for the developers to work on and, give them inputs. The next role, the next kind of roles are content. I put them in a bucket as content and others because they don't necessarily feature everywhere. It doesn't merit necessarily another bucket, but each game needs content writers, and if you have a flair for writing, and if you have a requirement, if you have a good understanding of the language that you had to work on, content writers are important. They not only so this is not only writing content in terms of long form or in terms of news articles to publish, but also think about it from, writing gamer stories. If you had to build a game and the game had to, have levels or had difficulties, or eventually even look at, what's the storyline for the game, then this is something like that. There's also social media managers. All of these companies that build out games have social media handles. In addition to that, each gaming title perhaps even has a handle if they're really, really popular. All of this requires people to manage. If you're an avid gamer and play the game and you know the nuance of the game, this is something that will come naturally to you. You need to, not only do you create content that you're going to post, but you're also going to interact with the actual fans that are online who are either commenting or interacting with you based on how they find the game, right? So this is another important, and of course a modern day role that has come in from the explosion of social media and all of that, right? The last bit the last kind of role that exists is the performance marketing role. Again, this is a highly it doesn't fit into a bucket necessarily, but the performance marketing role that kind of you look at is from a perspective of how is the game doing, comparing it with its peers, where is it losing out on, analyzing traffic, analyzing user behavior, where are they lost, how many users come, install the game, play for a week and have uninstalled, what were their pain points, trying to figure out those kind of things. Performance marketing is a layer on top of that which tries to make sure that you identify the right kind of users to market to, ensure that you actually thinking about the user's needs first. So the product manager actually gets inputs from even people at the performance marketing level to tell them, Acha, listen, we've realized that this is the pain point that we face. So you need to don't have, for example, a login up front when I open the game, right? You realize that a lot of people are just leaving the game because they don't experience anything at all, and we are taking information from them. So performance marketers will tell them, Acha, this is not going to do well, or this is not working out well. We need to pivot our strategy. We need to change. We need to think. So it requires a lot of analyzing and understanding what users are doing, and then suggesting and tweaking your marketing budgets that you would usually allocate on projects like this to make sure that you get the users to the game, the users on the platforms, the sign-ons, the registrations, whatever are your KPIs for that game. And I think finally, on a side note, there is this role that exists that is QA and testing. If you are a fan of playing games and you actually would like to do that on a long-term basis, managing the QA and testing aspects of it takes a lot. Actually, it's not just playing the game and reporting glitches and bugs that you foresee, but it's also taking the time out to understand what the game's being built, identifying the kinds of users that will play the game, and accordingly, planning for the kind of tests that you would have to run. This is in addition to a bunch of other things that you do, which includes black box testing, smoke testing, regression testing. These will probably leave out to the tester to handle, but as somebody who's managing a QA, your end goal is to ensure that you launch with as minimal bugs as possible. Clients that you work with would put a SLA, which is your standard licensing agreement, to say, okay, you can't have this, you can't have this problem, or if you have these kind of problems, you are liable to paying us a fine or a compensation in terms of payment of fees. So there are all these kind of things that come into play, and as somebody who leads the QA and the testing part of it is your end goal is to ensure how you can get a bug-free product out by understanding holistically what that game is, what is it supposed to do, and what it's achieving, and how you ensure that testing happens with that thought in mind. And you play as a user rather than as somebody who said, "Acha, this is the game, test it out, but I don't know, what first-person shooter gaming is all about." And then I'm just doing it as somebody who was told to, just access a website and play the game. So these are largely the kind of roles that exist within an ecosystem. Some focus towards development. The first two buckets are something that agencies, companies like us will largely look to have. The second bucket is things that are probably more outsourced to people. So there are social media management companies that exist. There are content writers, and there are performance marketers who do this as a full-time job, where their only focus is on working with different brands and companies. But these are all definite avenues for opportunities in this industry. Moving on from where you are currently. Yeah, I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. And if there's anything, the idea was to stop and take some questions here. So I'll just quickly stop my sharing.
Sir, I think we have time for only one question right now. I'll try to combine the two questions. The question being asked is by Siddhant and Bhaskar. So basically, Sports Interactive's main events are services to offline games like cricket, football, and kabaddi. Is the same strategy being planned for esports or mobile esports, or what is the mobile esports revolution looking like from the perspective of Sports Interactive?
So clearly, see, what Sports Interactive started off doing was being a digital agency to all of the brands that are involved in sports, the leagues and the associations, right? Through that, we realized that fan engagement is a big thing, and we've built out fan engagements that are not necessarily tied into esports at this point in time, but essentially allow users to interact and be part of the game, right? If a World Cup is going on in cricket, how can you be part of it? What can you do? Whether it's building out a selfie filter, to building out a game, to building out content related trivia quiz games that we worked with in the past with the likes of Cricinfo. With esports, the focus is, there are two different avenues that we are currently chasing, I would say. There is one avenue of actually going B2C, which is, build out a game that consumers could use, focused with the Indian market, obviously with our knowledge on the Indian market, and there is a clear, let's say, need, or there is a clear requirement to build out a game that's, let's say, cricket focused, for example, strategy based cricket game, let's say, for example, right? So the idea would be there to go to B2C route with that, build out a game, invest, because the resourcing that has been there, the technology is there, we've got everything in terms of the capabilities of doing this. So the one option or the one angle that is currently being driven is this kind of gaming. So think about an equivalent of your Ludo games. Kind of, could you build out something cricket specific, which could appeal to mass audiences and drive value? Second part of this tied to this is also real money gaming, which is again mobile game focused, but you do activities that require you to either spend some money at some level. And based on that, reward mechanism system where you get real-time rewards as well based on this. Again, an avenue that we are looking at this point in time, but it's the bigger play for this is going to be obviously rules changing over the next year or so that we expect to happen, but also tapping into European markets with that kind of gaming. And lastly, the more important thing is to be partners with platforms that could exist in a year's time. I'm not in a position to divulge any names, but rather large sporting governing body is looking at revamping its esports platform that it had for some time now, to build out something that is a complete ecosystem for you to create your own team, recruit players, build out your team, participate in competitions, build out a whole gamer profile, like just as you had a cricketer profile. these kind of things are something that even are in discussions right now with a major sports governing body at this point in time. They're looking to do something like this. Then I talked to you about how brands are looking at getting involved with a little bit with, building out a platform for bringing users across India, for example, to come and play and serve as a use case to then grow further with, tying up with sponsors through broadcast and even through, just gaming titles. Our focus on gaming will always be mobile first and a mobile approach. I think, the idea is going to always be that the more users, the more as users involved, the more likelihood you're going to use your mobile phone to do a lot of these activities. While certain people do still focus, and we still will have a version of web, but if you had to build out an app, for example, that app, if it was a strategy-based game that I talked about, it may just be that it's something that's just an app-driven game. We'll not even think about it from catering to an audience, which is clearly a small audience, and it's a falling audience, right? 4 years, 5 years ago, down the line, when we worked with the likes of ESPN Cricinfo to build out gaming activities, their split of website to mobile traffic would have been 70% on web, 30% on mobile. These days, when we work even with the likes of Indian Super League, whose audiences are across tier 2, tier 3 cities, hinterlands, there is still a 20% only website desktop traffic with 80% mobile-based traffic. So clearly the shift has been great. Mobile approach is always going to be something that we will consider. And even when we do that, you will take things into consideration. Like, for example, the India market is largely an Android market, right? 80% of the penetration rate of phones is, if not more, is perhaps an Android phone. So, if you have to take decisions on building out something, you think about Android first before you go iOS. So those are some of the thoughts that are currently, in focus that we look at when you want to build out gaming. And whenever we partner with whoever we partner with in the near future, in the long run, I think that focus is going to stay the same. Mobile approach, mobile based, largely going to cater to audiences that are, the age group of using mobile phones a lot more than desktop devices.
Thank you, sir. I think we have a little time to just engage in this last question. This is basically when you are trying to hire an employee or a player, as you call in Sports Interactive, what are the key skills which you look for apart from being a sports fanatic or passionate about sports?
So I think it's a lot of small things, but I think, what you said, what you told me to leave behind is probably the biggest thing. The passion for sports and the interest in sports is something that is clearly one of the biggest things that we look for. But leaving that aside, I think it's a lot of other smaller things that are important to us. So, for example, we are quite, cultural fit is important for us, because our aim is obviously to engage with users who we see as our fans ourselves. So, how do you fit in there? It's an industry that is in no way is it very organized. How much of flexibility do you bring along with you? Because as much as I would love to say it's a nice regular 9 to 5 job, to be honest, it's never going to be a 9 to 5 day in sports. Working with clients within India, it's perhaps even more difficult. When you work internationally, they actually think about timeframes like 6 months. When you work with clients in India, they actually think about timeframes of 4 weeks. So, it's very difficult. Flexibility is important. I think how you adapt and are flexible. Your fit, I think, is important. I mean, the important part is that you need to blend in with everybody here, and it's a mixed group of people that we have, right? We've got people across India that are either working remotely or even with us. When we were in the organization, when we were in office pre-COVID, we had up 500 players all mixing together in one. I think the other important bit for me that I would think about is, commitment and how much of willingness to learn. If you come in from a background that you're not necessarily familiar with, Sports Interactive clearly has had success stories of bringing people from diverse backgrounds to do things that they were never trained for or never planned to work in, right? But because of the sheer passion for sports and the ability or the reason to want to do work in sports, as been a driving factor for people to really excel in what they do. At Sports Interactive, the good part of it is there's always been an opportunity and a chance to do something, and it could be some off the head idea that you had, but if you thought it could add legs, and you can take that idea to somebody, and that somebody would let you guide you on how you can take this forward. Our setup is very horizontal. There are no vertical files. You roll up into verticals, obviously, but it's an open office system. People have the liberty to talk to you about anybody, from your reporting manager to your CEO to your peers, very easily. There's no bureaucracy or any requirements to kind of set out time and things like that. It's a very open office system. So I think that openness is also important to come through and translate from people that we potentially look at.
Definitely, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for this highly informative session. And with a very warm heart, I'd like to say that this was one of the topics which our college people were quite interested in, as most of them are sports fanatics. And definitely, this was a very informative session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad I was part of this. And like I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to gaming. If you just do a little bit of research, you'll realize that the gaming market is a huge market, potential to do a lot more. And really, there are that many more organizations now. It's no longer a niche organization, but there is the requirements to serve have meant that there are quite a few of these organizations that have come up, and there's always an opportunity to get into this kind. If you're passionate about gaming, passionate about sport, there's a lot of chances for you to kind of take that leap of faith and get involved in sport. So once again, thank you for having me. Thanks, Akhil, for coordinating and getting this piece together. And thank you to everybody who was part of this conversation. Like I said, if there's anything that you believe requires some answering, please do feel free to reach out through the emails that we have been sharing. And if there's a relevant answer that I can hopefully provide, I'm happy to do so as well.
Definitely, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice day. Stay safe, everybody.